You're listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Hello? Is that the famous astronomer, Sir Patrick Moore?
It is, very much so.
Any news on the space front?
Quite so. Elon Musk has just designed and developed 5 gigantic, state-of-the-art rocket ships. All members of Parliament, along with the American Senate, have first-class tickets aboard them, you see. They're told they're going to the moon.
Told? Where exactly are they going, Sir Patrick?
The new anomaly discovered recently astronomically. A huge black hole.
Welcome to Twin Souls. Twin Souls is brought to you in association with the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Your hosts, Philip and Ronald Kinsella. Now, our guest today is none other than Brandon Thomas. And Brandon Thomas is the host to Expanding Reality. I'm sure you've all heard about it. We have both been graced to appear on Brandon's show on many occasions, and we're so delighted to bring the man himself into the studio today to talk about his experiences, his beliefs, and what's going on with his life. So, hello, Brandon. How are you?
Hey, guys. I'm doing so wonderful. Thank you so much for this honor and that beautiful intro. This is amazing. I'm having a blast. This is great.
Well, no, it's really interesting because, as you know, because the things that we've learned about you is you're very spiritual, you're very connected, you deal with the most amazing guests that share their information with you. And this kind of brings us into some kind of, spiritual evolution. So first of all, we've got to ask, what got you involved in all of this? What got you really interested in dealing with aspects of theoretical content, the supernatural, all that type of thing?
What I do today is just a natural progression of over 20 years of research and a journey that I started well over 20 years ago with, in about a year and a half span, I introduced myself to psychedelics, spirituality, and conspiracies all in the same little window of time. And so I really was very interested in how flimsy reality can perceive, especially after my first acid trip. That it was a horrible trip, like it was very, very bad, but I learned a bunch of things from it. And so that started me down this crazy road. And then I just kept researching, and my ear is always attracted to these things. They just seem to find me, which is great. And so I took just all of this stuff, and then I heard about a thing called a podcast about 3 years ago when my wife introduced me to one. And now I'm so addicted to it, and I absolutely love it. It's been the greatest thing I've ever achieved in my life, because it's been all of the skills that I've learned and all of the things that I've done my entire life are poured into this one thing. And so it's every bit of me, and it evolves with me, which is great because I'm always changing too. That's the one constant, right? It's change.
Yeah, when you mentioned the acid trip, that's fascinating because, Brandon, basically it breaks down reality.
Yes.
The conventional model we that instilled in us, from birth. It's rather like the Matrix. Is either which pill you take, So that's fascinating.
It is, and this is the thing about psychedelics is that and that's why I mentioned those 3 things, because those 3 things were the most significant in my perception that I have today. And so they altered the course of the way that I view the world. So that was why they're so important. And to have them all kind of in the same time period. So as why I'm attempting to process one, I'm engaging in another. And this is times 3. So it was my trinity. It was the 3 things. It's conspiracy, spirituality, or conspirituality, as they say. And then also psychedelics, which also all of it marries together perfectly. So as I was exploring these independent roads together, they were on the same path for me because I was exploring them in conjunction with one another as I was progressing. And so it's been this hand in hand operation that's been very interesting. And this is where you really shake your reality up with the conspiracies looking to question the narratives of what you're presented. And I, can usually see what I'm not or where I'm being lied to. I might not have all the answers as far as what we are, but I know what I'm not based on what doesn't resonate with me. And it's usually a lot of the stuff coming out of that box. And so it feels like with that element of it, also with the work of Neil Donald Walsh, who I was gracious enough to have on my show, he's the reason, I always say this, he's the reason I'm not an atheist. And it's because I was at an interesting point being brought up in the church. And then after that experience and branching out, I was introduced to his Conversations with God book. And that set me on an entirely different route, completely. And that's why to speak with him on the show was just a bucket list thing for me. Kind of like when I get to talk to you boys. Y'all were on a list that made that I wanted to start the show, and both of you were on that list long before we'd ever met. And you two are actually part of the reason I started my show. You were on the list.
Oh, bless you. And, that's really sweet of you. And the thing is, though, that, I think the really important part is that all of us are beginning to go through some kind of awakening process. And of course, your show is called Expanding Reality. And of course, that explains everything about what you've been describing. So can you give us a description? I know a lot of people will be so interested to know what you experienced through this, this psychedelic trip that you have, because we're beginning to understand that with DMT and other, drugs and that type of thing, that people have had these really profound and life-changing experiences that clearly demonstrates that this is not the reality that we've come to believe in. So what happened to you, Brandon?
My first psychedelic, couldn't agree more, by the way. My first psychedelic trip was that it was acid, and it was LSD. It was liquid form, if that's relevant to the story. It was 2 hits. It was one that was on a sweet tart that we put in a little baggie and took with us later, and one that was directly on my tongue at the time that this guy showed up in a parking lot in high school, as I'm 18.
Yeah.
And we had a buddy of mine that got a settlement, and so he had a bunch of money at 18 from an injury or wreck that he was in when he was younger. And so he bought hotel rooms and drugs and all kinds of stuff. We had a great time, and as much fun and safety as 18-year-olds could have with an endless bank account and, free time. So I did the acid thing because I'd really wanted to try psychedelics. Now at that age, and I have a theory on this of why you approach things with a different mentality and why that's still valuable. The reason I say this is because a lot of people go into psychedelics just to get messed up, just to mess with their head, just to, get into an altered state. But as you grow into it, you realize that it's sacred and there's knowledge in there. No, I'm a big believer in both. I think that all visceral experiences, if you're not hurting anyone else, are valuable. So at this time, I was just looking for, fun. That was it. I was an 18-year-old lad, and I was looking for that. So I got it. But it turned violently bad very, very quickly. And so I had what I guess they refer to as a bad trip, and I was really off it. And like I said, 18, he had gotten a hotel room. We were supposed to be out for the night. Ended up, my parents called me home, which I was still living there at the time, so I had to go. Instant crash. Everything got dark. I started crying and vomiting, and it was really, really bad. So introspectively, it was really, I think what's interesting about psychedelics too, and what I know now, what I knew early on about them, but what I respect so much about them is it takes such a brave person to want to do psychedelics because there's no off switch. So if it's bad for a long time, and there's nothing you can do about it. What it teaches you is how to live in discomfort and how to know that there's no real pain involved. And it shows you how to distinguish the difference between pain and discomfort. Discomfort you can deal with, and it again has its value in this lesson. So that's what I think that I learned on that. But really, also it gave me a glimpse, like into a keyhole, into another world of where these colors and shapes and this fractal reality that was in motion constantly. Again, that the only constant is change, right? And this really showed me the interconnectivity of things and how we're all connected, and the lights and the colors and these patterns. And it's at that point where it really started to expand that, maybe it's not something necessarily biochemical, maybe yes, so that it could be explained as that, but perhaps that's an oversimplification of the process. Maybe what you're experiencing is is like a glimpse into another world, or if you're a simulation fan, argument fan, then like a cheat code to the Matrix or something like that. It could be a thinning of the veil in a way that maybe that's the next level of reality, or level of reality that we have access to via these modalities, perhaps.
Yeah, do you know, that's really interesting, Brennan, because, we hear a lot about, we've been through all the subject matters like you have with alien abductions and all these types of things. And of course, what happens is that there is an alteration of reality when that experience is taking place. And I think perhaps that's occurring because it's being enforced upon the individual that's being taken, whereas things can be done, with oneself, with some kind of, drugs. And I think this is beginning to show the public that consciousness to a large degree is not just limited to the physical reality. And you've always known that, right?
Not always, but the amount of time that I have felt that I've known that is longer than the amount of time that I felt that it was the other way, if that makes sense.
Right, absolutely.
But I needed to know the other way to know that I perhaps want to entertain something differently. And I feel like I should perhaps just at this point in the conversation go with the disclaimer, that's the fun one, that I have no idea what's going on with anything. But I do look around this place and I see it as magical. I have awe for everything here. I know that there's just something beautiful and magical here, and I know that. There is a darkness here, but if you zoom out far enough, it's just you. I tend to kind of look at these things this way. And so whenever I'll explain some of these concepts, I tend to get passionate about them in the sense that I fancy the idea, I guess, cosmetically, and so I get excited about it, but I don't want anyone out there listening to be confused with that I plant my flag anywhere, because I do not. I have no idea what's going on here. I live in a realm of possibilities. I'm a possibilian, as Dr. David Eagleman says. So that's where I find myself. So anything we talk about, just know that this is just from my perspective, guys, and this is just what I've gathered in this little time I've had on this, little whatever's going on. That's all I got for you.
Yeah, and I think that is wonderful, and I think that is so beautifully illustrated, because a lot of people profess they've got the answers, and I can assure you also we don't have the answers.
Correct.
We only got a bunch of theories that we're trying to stick together and piece together, but from each individual souls that we are, I think we learn from one another through our experiences, those that are being honest and truthful about them. But one of the things I find fascinating with your work, Brandon, is that you're so a wonderful human being. You've got this real energy about you where you're so connected to whomever you're talking to. And I think that's very important, because even for us as well, too, we learn from our peers, we learn from other people. But it is consciousness at the end of the day, I think, that is beginning to, rebel against the control mechanism that's been enforced upon us. And I know that talking to a lot of people, they can feel this negativity. I mean, how do you see that, Brandon, within your mind? How do you see the world at present with all the difficulties that's going on at the moment? Do you think there's any hope for us?
So yes, I do think that we definitely have hope. And this is a question I've been asking people lately: is what gives you hope? Because there's got to be a reason that you get out of bed every morning. Now, one of the things I will say that gives me hope is I feel like I've got a big mission here. I actually know this. It's a deep down thing. It's one of those things that maybe I was granted access to a little part of me to where it's almost like there's a higher version of me that I can see, but it's through the sense of intuition, not through like an optics or anything. So kind of seeing it through your third eye. And that the veil that's there is a hard barrier. Like I could see that it's a hard barrier. But for some reason, the enlightenment that I've gathered along the way, whatever puzzle pieces I've been able to kind of slap together, have thinned that barrier a little bit to where I can kind of see shadows of what's going on. So I can see that there's hope in there. And that's what it does it. Plus, I'm just a boundless optimist. I'm a chronic optimist. And, it's that old thing about, this, I find the positivity in everything, in absolutely everything. I mean, some would say to a fault, I don't, because I'm super positive. So I don't see it that way. It's one of these interesting things, like the old sayings, like, one step back and two steps forward is not setback. It's the cha-cha. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's not, I fell down those stairs and ow, that sucks. It's, man, I made it down those stairs really fast. That's just how I look at the world. And so I think that plays a big role in the way that I view things, because I don't get stuck in trauma cycles. I'm I don't want to say immune to that, but what I am able to do is transmute it pretty quickly. And especially now that I'm way more aware that the universe is a mirror of you. So I'm able to very rapidly realize what's going on and move forward. So that's just kind of a thing that wraps up into this concepts, but it makes me super open-minded to the fact that I don't know what the hell's going on, but what the advantage in that is, because it sounds very disorienting. And I can tell you it's nothing more further from the truth. I've never felt more me, stable and grounded, the less stable and grounded reality got. And this is an interesting thing to intellectually come to, I think, philosophically. And it's whenever you start, again, I'm very conspiratorial minded because I was wired that way. So it's part of the algorithm that I filter things through. And so, but I don't let it get to me negatively. That's an important distinction of, don't exist in that version of it anymore. But so connecting these dots is something that is very important as well. So again, it's this accumulative filter that everything's viewed through that takes it in a direction that is objective. And that's what I like about it. It's fluid, it's in flux, it can change with new information. I don't have beliefs, I have ideas. Nothing is rock solid for me. There's cognitive dissonance is not a t-shirt in my closet. I just don't know.
I find it very interesting,
Wonderful.
Brandon, that what's beautiful about this, the whole enigma of reality, UFOs, aliens, and experiences, is the fact that the people like yourself and us have somehow touched by something changes us, like your experience you reiterated earlier. Something like with us, with alleged encounters with these things we call aliens, although I don't believe they are. I think there's something else. But the point is, we're touched by something transforms us into a different kind of people. We are more open-minded. We're more curious. We're down the rabbit hole, you see. We can push down it, so we want answers. And it changes our mindset, doesn't it? This is what's affecting you as well. It's changed your mindset into a positive kind of soul. Because although you do weigh up, as you said, the conspiracies, you're not negative about them. So that's very constructive. But it's always interesting to me that the many souls that we come across have had experiences, or they've touched some kind of alternate reality to push them or propel them into a kind of new mode of thought.
You know, I couldn't agree more, and I kind of have been really entertaining, and I'm sure we touched on this on the episode when you boys were just on, and amazing job, by the way, guys. Thank you so much for that. That was so much fun. Everyone's been so sweet about coming out and saying how much they love you guys. Of course, everyone loves y'all. So anyway, it was a lot of fun. But that element of consensus reality, or that this place is all kind of the same, and the same stuff's going on for all of us, that this place is not, you know, a fixed reality for us that's only fluid from our observation of it, and that everything else is in a form of co-collective creativity, but not a real one, if you want to hold up air quotes and drop them on that word real really hard. So I want to say that, I mean, moving forward with ideas like that are like I said, in my mind, the way that I kind of wrap myself into this stuff. What's interesting about it is a variety of catalysts for people that presents itself in, or the variety in ways that affects people to the degree in which we're talking. So it's an extra experience that these folks have that changes their view of reality. For some people, it's paranormal experiences. For some people, it's extraterrestrial, it's abduction. For some people, it's traumatic events as childhood. There's all sorts of a myriad of a tapestry of options for that to manifest in this reality. But so what's interesting about this whole thing, I guess, is I've always felt like the observer, not the experiencer. But it's once I realized that this whole place is a participatory universe and that you have way more control over it than you were told, which is part of the experience, by the way. You need those ego structures to break out of. But that part of it was something that was very interesting to me. So if that's the case, these people who get UFO abductions and stuff like that, that's a very specific thing to them, like you boys. But I will not have that happen, I don't think, at all. I'm not meant to be an experiencer. I actually don't even dream, which is really interesting. It makes me feel like a non-player character. I heard that's one of the traits, that you actually don't exist if you don't dream. But anyway, it feels like one of these things to where I'm not meant to be enlightened in that way. And I think that it's because of the type of work that I do, because of my show, because of my perception, because that's what's gold to the thing. I will go anywhere you've always wanted. And you know this. I will entertain any idea because I'm not married to any idea. I haven't had an experience that's altered my perception of reality in a way that would exclude any other possibility for me, in the way that was so profound. Like, no, the ones I saw were gray. They have to be gray. If they're not gray, it didn't exist for you. You know, there's this kind of like filter that you will naturally process through. And so I don't think I'm meant for that because I've got such a broad perspective on it. I'm totally with it. I'm probably get abducted all the time, but they don't let me remember. You know, and I think we've probably all been abducted. They just only let a certain few remember because it's necessary for your experience. It's part of the package you signed up for.
You know, I agree with you, Brandon. Totally. I'm totally on the same page with you as Ronnie is with regards to that. But, you know, what's really strange is I remembered when I was a kid, you know, and when I was around about the age of 10, and there was a grandfather that passed over on my stepfather's side. And I was so shocked. And of course, at that point, you know it was the UFO experiences that we had later on in life, but I remembered like life didn't make any sense to me, and people were going about their business like it was all brushed under the carpet. But I was like, well, I need to know what we are, where we come from, why we're here. And this is something that, you know, I do feel there's a lot of people that's beginning to become unwired, as it were, because they're starting to question reality. And I know there's a lot of ideas out there, but, you know, this is what drove me. So I think for a lot of people, I deal with life and I deal with death all the time, as you know, with the work that I do and then the UFO stuff and that you do. You know, looking at you mentioned now talking about Neil Donald Walsh about the Conversations with God series. I read those books and I was absolutely captivated. Yeah. But again, I thought that, you know, his mind is being opened to a new concept of reality that's filtering through to him. And what he was talking about was amazing. So this higher mind, this higher consciousness is fascinating, isn't it, Brandon?
It really is. And this is the part where there was like this connectivity to it that was exclusive to you, that was accessible. That was very interesting to me. That was something that was not on my radar at all. Again, raised in church, baptized, you know, all that good stuff. And so, you know, had a very religious background, parents very involved in the church still to this day, God bless them. And so it was this thing to where I never saw the world as anything other than that option, because that's the only option I was presented. Well, I was presented that or the fiery place. And so to me, neither suited me. You know, it was just an early thing of like, you know, maybe, but perhaps there's something else out there. And so that's when I started looking in it. But it was that book. It was his work. And of course, I mean, he's written, 39 books in 37 languages and, you know, published, you know, worldwide, all this crazy stuff. He's just one of those dudes. And, you know, even down to the like character assassination, which everyone at that level goes through with the like, oh, it's fake and he's making it up and all this stuff. Who cares? Because the benefit that it played in my life as far as altering my perception in a great way is invaluable to me. This is just like somebody arguing that comic books aren't valuable when they clearly are. There's a lot that you can glean from the imaginary world that will manifest itself in a way of fiction, but also present itself to you in your reality, because it's something there's value in there. You know, you look at a Spider-Man comic, you know that there's not some dude swinging around in a web, but you know, with great power comes with great responsibility. That's awesome. That's something you learned from Spider-Man. And had this fictional character not been around to impact your life in reality, you would not have learned that lesson in that way that time. So it all plays a role. And this is what's so interesting about imagination, about creation, about all of it, about perception mainly. And this is the main argument I have against the either or concept of like, honestly, any either or. I've never done well with that. You know, do this or that. I've never done well with that. I'm a big, I do what I want kind of guy. You know what I mean? And so that's also wired in there. And I'm optimistic about it. So I tend to lean more to the side of that. If it's these things that are telling you one or the other, it's probably all not true. You know, there's a subversion aspect to things that I'm just inherently I have a radar for. And so whenever those present themselves, it's usually, like I said, I know more about what I'm not, because I'll run away from stuff like that, because instantly I recognize it for what it is and don't put any more energy into a system that from my perspective requires energy. So as long as you don't engage and participate with it, it doesn't have its fangs in you, if you will. It's just like that story of the two wolves, right? The grandson and grandfather are sitting there and they're two wolves, one named Love and one named Fear. And the grandson asked the grandfather, which one grows? And the grandfather's answer was perfect because he said, whichever one you feed. You have to be a participant in this. And this is, again, back to the participatory universe element of it. There's a wonderful book that I will recommend now by a guy named Mel Schwartz. I've had him on the show. His second episode with me will be coming out soon. He's got a really cool event taking place on March, so he came back on and we had a wonderful chat. His book is called The Possibility Principle. Now, it is a wonderful read. It's not super long as far as like you won't invest a lot of your time getting through the material, but it's wonderful. It'll change your life. And it's one of these things. It really shows you that the old ways, which is how he puts it, which I love. So they weren't wrong. They serve their purpose just like anything else, and they're just no longer useful to us. So the old ways is that this Newtonian mechanistic way of looking at the universe. Well, Mel argues he blends psychology with quantum physics. And so he dips into the concept of, well, perhaps it's way more of a participatory universe, which aligns way more with the concepts of spirituality, with manifestation, with these sort of deliberate action practices that were way more Druid in origin, that were ancient, that are arguably the wisdom of authenticity, which is what the system presented to you and demanding your attention and presenting you with these either or options. That's what they require. So it's this interesting, balance of energies here. And I feel the more that I look at it, it can all be boiled down to sort of I hate to use the word war. So I'll put an attention contest. I'll put it this way. Here's the metaphor that just came to mind as I'm explaining this, is that you could see the dark and light forces here, and we're going to use that vernacular just for the sake of simplicity because people know what I'm talking about, even though it's all you, perhaps, and it's all experiential, which is awesome. So there's never a wrong way to do it. It's just about what serves and doesn't serve. Okay. Now that we've gotten that out of the way. Now, if you think about it, the metaphor that I would use is picture you as being like a child sitting in the middle of a room. Your mother goes to one side of the room and your father goes to the other. Don't like anthropomorphize this out and drag up some old traumas that you have with your parents and say, well, my dad was the bad one, so he's the bad. I'm just using the analogy, okay? So let's say that one of them's bad, one of them's good, okay? Well, both are vying for your attention, but you're the one that has to crawl to the other. They're not going to pick you up and carry you there. And this is a great metaphor for the work that goes in. Now, it takes a lot of work. It's a slippery slide and a quick route to go to the dark vibrations or the lower vibrations. And it's a bit of a climb and a treacherous one and lonely one at times to get back to the higher vibrations. But man, they feel so much better. And it's worth it, when you get there, because you've achieved something as well as achieved a state of something. And so it's these kind of ideas where I tend to think, again, when you extrapolate this out again, that's why there's no kind of wrong way to do this. It's just really like a choice, but it is your choice. So this element of fear of that someone is going to force you to do something, I don't believe exists here in a real way. You have to give up your sovereignty, because that's the one thing that is true here. You're gullible as all get out. You can be convinced of anything, and we know this, but it's not going to force you to do anything by force. It's always going to be like a vampire. I think the metaphor of the vampire is perfect here because you have to invite it in.
It's like that disconcerting thought of the fork in the road, isn't it? The decisions you make, which, as which children, we're full of innocence and we're looked after and, decisions are made for us. But when you get older, the forks in the road become more unsettling. Because yes, reality, which route do you take, going down that road of your own reality? And of course, a lot of people will affirm with this that you do go back and imagine what if I took the left? What if I took the right? And this branches out into it extends out to a whole new paradigm of reality. So, and as you're speaking about reality, Brandon, yes, because this is the interesting thing. It's only how we envision it, really. I know people might laugh at that, but the reality is our own interpretation. As you stated, our outlook is based on our interpretation of people and the world.
Yes, and it's all filtered through what's called your paradigm, which is an accumulation of your beliefs and experiences. So, which are all specific to you. So again, this argues against consensus reality because no two are going to be alike ever in the history of anything ever because of the options and the varieties here. So the interesting part about what you said, the metaphor about branching out, this is one of the best metaphors for this existence that is pretty comforting in my mind. So I'll deliver it now. So what I like to do in picture is picture reality and your experience here as branches on a tree, a fruit tree to be specific. Now, every end of a fruit tree goes different directions. It twists and turns and myriads, and there's different leaves at different points. Again, no two are identical. Now it forms this larger whole, which would be to say your option of experience. Okay, so this is what you could experience here based on all parameters available to you. Your limited five senses, the physical world that we know exists in this world, the way that, you know, gravity and stuff like that works, or the law of buoyancy, whatever you want to say. Then these are things that you're here to have that particular experience. And so whenever you filter it through that point of view, this is where the fun happens because it's all up to you. It's all your options. So there's no like bad place to go in my mind. And that's why, again, these either or things kind of break down. There are way too many options and you're given far too little information to decide your eternity based on your limited perspectives with, again, the limited options that you get here to make an informed decision. And because no two are alike. So it can't be this either or. Again, this is where just even intellectually it breaks down for me. But the interesting part about the fruit tree is that whenever you get to the end of any branch, it fruits. It's got fruit on every branch. So technically there's no wrong way to go because at the end of every single journey, there's fruit at the end of it. So at the end of every lifetime in this metaphor, it's a beautiful ending.
Brendan, I want to ask you as well, too, you know, what's interesting, I think that the way that you're explaining these ideas is absolutely incredible. I think a lot of people relate to them. And when you mentioned also imagination, because people tend to think that imagination is like a little box in the brain that you open now and again, but actually imagination is mind. I mean, a mind creates. And I think that a lot of what people may be experiencing, ourselves included, could be another level or part of ourselves operating on different frequencies of awareness. I mean, we have to take that into consideration. I think this is absolutely fascinating, isn't it? It's incredible, isn't it?
Oh, this is fun. And absolutely, you're absolutely right. And this is like this is what I live for. This is these type of discussions right here. So this is already like top 5 discussions I've ever had in my life. And I have discussions for a living. This is great.
It's also interesting that belief shapes reality, and in the most incredible ways. I'll give you an example. I shouldn't do it, but I used to take the mickey about the country club. You know, I do the voices like, well, we went to the country club, don't you know? And Philip and I did this for quite a while. Oh, yes, they've got their own, monograms on everything at the country club. Well, what is terribly ironic, and this is absolutely true. It actually happened. People will put this down to coincidence. Philip and I spent our time invited by a company at the country club. And when we got in there, I thought, do you know, Philip, I can't believe it. We were mocking it for years, and we're actually at a country club. Don't you know? Yeah. So the irony, but this is the reality. Unwittingly, I tend to find that when we take the fun nicely out of things and you forget it, my goodness, doesn't come back bite you on the backside, doesn't it?
It's this self-fulfilling prophecy idea. You will see this again. And that's one of the interesting things about this place as well, is that it's a spiral. It's not an ascension in a linear fashion like we're used to perceiving time, which is only a useful tool for us to explain it to one another. It's not actually a noble way to articulate it.
Do you know, I've got to ask you, Brandon, because I know that you're an observer, but your part is just as important as anyone else's, because we're all, key players in this, understanding of reality as we know it. So I want to ask you a question. I mean, where do you think this is taking us? Where do you think this is leading each and every one of us in terms of the grand plan, if there is a grand plan? What's your thoughts on that?
I actually have nothing but thoughts on that. So how long is this show? I would say that the grand plan could be a variety of things, which is, again, kind of where I'm at now. Now, I can only tell you where I'm at now in my understanding, and this changes constantly. So check, we'll do an update every 6 months, and I'll be like, it's totally different. None of that's true. But again, this is just kind of the things that I think about. I would say that on a grand level, that it's basically an experiential place, that it's too deliberately set up that way. Now, I'm not saying that the creator God of any religion has it right. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that perhaps there is either an architect that's created a simulation, or a God or a deity that has some sort of organizational matrix that's like an organic matrix that has systematic repetitious cycles to it and works in ways like the sky works like a clock, like that seasons are predictable, that migration patterns can be, dependent on certain variations. Like there's math to this place. It seems very deliberate, but it seems to be set up with intense mystery and then also an inquisitive inhabitant. So it seems like here we have this perfect mixture of a place. And again, you just kind of look at what we're offered, what we have access to, and then what our traits are, like what's our drive, what gets us out of bed, and what the motivation is for humanity to do what we do. And when you look at all of that and you zoom out, this is very important. This is something I do constantly, is just zoom out a little bit. It can be challenging at first, of course, to do this, but just zoom out and look at things from a big perspective, a few layers out. And think of reality layered like Photoshop or something, where you have different layers, or like Iron Man 1. Remember Iron Man 1?
Oh, yes.
And he had all those transparencies, and when you laid it out, it made the picture, but individually it just looked like rubbish. Cool, but not the thing. So that's perhaps what this reality is. And you layer your experience through that perception. Now, I think also, and this is going to be very controversial, that it's all perfect. I think that what you need in this life to know what you need to know is here. This is another fun thing I like to think about when applying this thought to these concepts is that perhaps that you're already, dead, and you're living a past life memory of yourself. And whenever you go to that tunnel at the end of your life, really it's you dying in that life, but also it's just the restart of your past life memory, which we know time doesn't exist, or the reports are that time is different there. So you could live it in real time and it'd be half a second. You could be flying through the air in a car crash right now in some other dimension and live that in a perpetual state until you actually make impact or decide whether you survive or not. There are so many crazy brain melting options that are what are going on here. I kind of lean more, if I have to just ideologically pick a favorite, it's more of the egg scenario, which is a YouTube video that this lady put out that says that everything here is you, that you boys are just another expression of me and I of you, and that there's no difference or no separation, only the illusion of so. And even Einstein said this, reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. And so when you look at things from this vantage point, this is where things like wars start to evaporate. This is where this mindset, if you haven't ever contemplated it before, this is the reason that your soul ekes out over injustice, is because of your ability to get into that zone and to see it from that perspective, because you see it from a higher level. And at that level, you can see how ridiculous and silly and nonsensical and how much of a waste of time it is. And it's from that part that we create, because the 50, or that higher dimensional opportunity, that's what they see as opportunity, not dismay. That's a 4D viewpoint. And this was something very interesting. Do you guys want me to explain this to you real quick?
Yeah, sure, Brandon. Go ahead. This is interesting.
So one of the interesting things that I found really cool, and I found a guy that explained it on TikTok. I do not have the gentleman's name, but I am going to articulate it in the best way that I can possible. Whenever you look at the work of Dolores Cannon, and she talks about this 3D and 5D split, and then people talk about this ascension, and there's this third dimension, fifth dimension. Well, nobody talks about the fourth dimension. And it's interesting because anytime you talk about the fourth dimension with someone, it's always something they want to skip over, just like you want to in this reality. Everybody says, you kind of want to skip over that. What this gentleman brought forth was a new perspective of this, because I think that in a lot of the language and woo-woo, people can get lost in how this is practically applied in life. So I'm going to give you the most practical application of how to view things in different dimensions that you can do right now, and you will never look at your reality the same after this, and you're welcome in advance. So let's talk about something as simple as geoengineering or chemtrails, okay?
Now, no matter how you feel about chemtrails currently, whatever your viewpoint of it is, there are reports that people have said that there are airplanes flying above your head and that there are aerosols being sprayed out of them for whatever reason. And the reasons vary. Let's just stick to the fact that perhaps there are airplanes spraying something out of them above you, okay? From the third dimensional reality, from the 3D, and here's what I want you to keep in mind through all of this, is that all of these are levels of awareness. They're not physical places you travel to. There's no Narnia door that's going to open and you're going to step into a new world called the fifth dimension. All of it exists right here, right now, but you have access to all of it right here, right now, and this is how you view it. So from the third dimension perspective, back to our analogy, geoengineering or chemtrails don't exist because the official sources that you trust, no matter if they're lying to you or not, because you don't see them as that, you just can't physically see it. You can't. It's invisible to you. The concept that anything coming out of that TV is other than absolute truth and fact, and that's the third dimension. It's very dense, it's very heavy, it's very controlled, and that is your opportunity to see things for what they are. But from that third dimension perspective, you may have heard some crazy person, like your uncle, your drunk uncle came over one time and talked about, these chemtrails and they're crazy, but man, he's crazy. What is he talking about? And from your 3D perspective, you are surrounded by people that mirror your reality back to you, or your idea of reality back to you. So you only get back to you, yeah, that's ridiculous. What a conspiracy theorist. Oh my God, that guy's crazy. And yeah, he's just the drunk uncle. What does he know? So therefore, that is your understanding of this. They're nothing more than just planes flying by. They're contrails. Stupid Bill Nye told me. Okay, that's 3D. Now, 4D is also just a perspective. The fourth dimension exists in a state of truth, but an abundance of fear. So truths, and this is why I think everybody wants to skip over it. It is when I looked at things this way is when I started to realize why people avoid even the discussion of the fourth dimension. So the fourth dimension is where you Paul Revere. This is when you see the chemtrails for what they are, sticking to the example. And then you want to wake everybody up and, oh my God, they're spraying barium and sulfur and aluminum and strontium and it kills everything. And oh my God, the levels on this mountain went up and there's all this data and even these meteorologists are coming out and talking about this, and guys, let me send you a video, and you panic. And you do this in a state of fear. Now you're enlightened to a lot of injustices, and you do this from a sweet place because it hurts your heart to see that this can happen to fellow people out here. And what's more is that people are ignorant to it, and you feel it's your responsibility to wake everyone up. We all go through this. This is a natural progression. It's scary and it's frantic and it's a dense state of being. Some would say, and I would go ahead and argue here, that it's more dense than the 3D, because in the 3D you at least are, there's an ignorance is bliss quality to it, to where, yeah, it, you know, it's not ideal or whatever, but man, as long as you just mow your yard and you go to the kid's birthday party and you show up for work, and you know, it's like this patternistic thing that you get into, that it's not that bad. Yeah, it's not that great, but it's not that, you know, there's no real risk and challenges there, which is where growth occur. But this being cast into the fourth dimension, or this fourth dimension perspective, again, just simply based on the understandings you have. Now, what's interesting about these levels as well is once you're exposed to them intellectually, I visualize this as ascending a treehouse with a bunch of different levels. Well, the levels have trapdoor floor type things like we're all familiar with. This is why the treehouse is the analogy. You go through the trapdoor when you step into the new reality, or new understanding is the metaphor in this. Then when you shut that door behind you, there's no handle on the inside. So you actually can't go back down. You're too in. Like you can't go back. You already know stuff. So this fourth dimensional state is a panicked Paul Revere state, is what I call it, where you're waking everybody up. You're sending people videos about 9/11 and all sorts of stuff. And it's again, a necessary state in the awakening process, especially for 4D people that need to be pulled out of it. It's a jarring experience that's necessary for that development. So I get it. I don't participate in it anymore. I used to be a conspiracy theorist when I was in the fourth dimension, and I did that. I Paul Revered. I got frustrated, and it's toxic for me. And that's the one great understanding that you get to. Now, the fifth dimension is where I tend to resonate with the most, if I must say so myself. You're incredibly lucky. You, back to our analogy, see the chemtrails and they were for what they are. Yep, they are absolutely geoengineering. Of course, they've been doing it since the 50s. They did this in Atlanta, where they set stuff up on buildings and drove around in Studebagas in poor neighborhoods and sprayed the very same things that they're spraying in our skies now, which is an absolute fact. And did this on their own people, because part of the Nuremberg Agreement is that you can't do experiments on other countries, but you can do it on your own people. All governments of the world have taken them up on this. So this is the thing. And so, but you realize this from a dispassionate place of, number one, you can't do anything about it other than to be a voice and a lighthouse for people who are seeking the information that come to you to seek it, not that you push on anyone else. Because again, in this, you see opportunity to be informed and to be a lighthouse, but also not to be negatively, vibrationally brought back down to the fear state that exists. You observe that it exists, and then you tend your own garden, which is all you have control on anyway, how you perceive and interact with your world. It's an interesting way to perceive it, because again, this is just a perception thing. So in your fifth dimensional state, this is why there's such a rough entrance in between 3D and 4D in this example, because it's very dissonant. It's very heavy and thick, and you're walking into a cloud, and it's just, again, heavy. And you want to wake everybody up, and you have the answers and no one else does, and this can save their lives, and you feel it's your responsibility. And this is what, again, is interesting whenever you jump into it, is there's just panic state. And then you get to this calm state. You can also liken it to like jumping off of a waterfall. It's like, oh my God, exciting and panicked, and oh my God, where's the water? And then you hit it, and then you come up, and then you float down the river. And it's more of a thing. You've had that experience, and it was cool. It was interesting, and you definitely learned a lot, and you survived it. But it was exhilarating and exciting. But now you're just floating. You don't need to engage in that anymore.
Do you know, that is an amazing example, and as you describe that so beautifully, Brandon, is that I and Ronnie can both relate to that fourth dimensional level, because, you know, even for us, sometimes life feels kind of scary. You're not in control. You can see what's going on. You want to tell people. We don't want to tread on other people's toes. So I can totally understand where you're coming from with that analogy.
Yeah, I can understand as well why people avoid it.
Yes, that's right.
Well, right. But ironically, it's where most people exist, especially in the enlightened community, because you get enlightened, but it's not to a comfortably enlightened state. So, which is an ironic thing anyway, because what is that, right? It's all subjective also. So what's interesting also is, again, you know, I mean, back to like the reality is so unstable, but I'm incredibly comfortable with it being not solid, because the people that told me it was solid and what they told me it was a complete lie. So I would rather know what I observe in this reality versus what I'm told this reality is from people that I've trained myself over years of a toxic relationship to know that whatever they're telling me is the inverse of reality. Whatever they're saying, do the opposite. You're going to be just fine. It just, in my mind, from my perspective and my paradigm, then that is the way that this place works. And it's, again, if you want to zoom out a little bit, it's meant to be that way. It's meant to be a beacon so that you run the other direction. Now, it's meant to scare you, but you're not meant to stay there. And this is where you get out of the 4D. This is the thing. Because again, you need people to Paul Revere. It's a very important role, and you'll play that role and serve that purpose on your way by. But you don't need to stay there. You experience it and you move on. So you ascend to it to where now, instead of the fear, you transmute it into excitement. You transmute it into passion. You transmute that fear into opportunity. And that's where you exist. It's a state of being. That's what the fifth dimension is. You will find that your luck changes, that amazing miracles happen to you constantly, and you are open to receive this, and it just flows in constantly, guys. It's the coolest damn thing.
Wow. And you know, Brandon, I mean, you know, a lot of people ask me, and a lot of people explain that sometimes they find themselves in a hopeless situation with whatever's going on in their life. They sometimes feel trapped. There's been some people that, you know, can't see any way out, no matter how they try to change their outlook on life. I mean, do you have any advice to anyone that you know is going through these situations?
The synchronicity on this is absolutely beautiful, and I would expect nothing less. I was having a conversation just yesterday and reached some very nice clarity about this. I'm gonna compare this to EDM music for you kids out there. Electronic dance music, I believe, is what you call it. So yes. In a progression, they're very also mathematical, and this is what's nice about it. It's pretty predictable. No real odd time signatures. It's mainly 4/4 time signatures, so it's very tap-footable. So with this, though, there's a point in an EDM song where it's predictable. You could set your watch by it, where it goes 8 bars and then changes, 8 bars and then changes. But on those changes, sometimes there'll be a dip in decibel level. So the DJ will go in and purposefully dial back the decibel level. And you do this for a couple of reasons. And I think one of the main reasons, and this tendency, I guess, skill or technique that DJs use is one of the best examples of you can look around in your reality and see a dualistic universe. So you're at a steady volume the entire time. You're coming up to a change. You decrease the volume a little bit. Number one, it gets your attention, so it's noticeable. Number two, it changes things up. It notifies you that something exciting is about to happen. Then as that happens, it disappears to a point to where you think it's going to fade out, and all of a sudden, boom, bigger than before, huge drop beat. It's so exciting, and it was better than you thought it was going to be, and you anticipated it to be, because of there are things in there you can't predict, but that hit you in a way that are so extremely profound, and you are grateful for that lack of decibels that dropped you into it, because it shows you dichotomy. It shows you a difference. It shows you that when this happens and decreases you a little less, and bam, you're back. So but you needed the drop to make the slam important and potent. So you need the times of darkness, and you need to feel disconnected, because the way that I view these, and again, this is so cool that this is just happening now. I'll give you two bits of advice, two main ones. And that would be, the way that I view it is, I've come to a point in my life to where I can really see that when things are in the dumps, or I feel very not me, I'm not in my flow state, I'm not confident, I'm just basically the bizarro world of everybody that you see all the time. This guy that's confident and, can talk about anything and just can call it up and stuff. It's the opposite of all of that. And it really tanks me out. Now, I know, though, that is a rest period for me from the universe. It is a gift from the universe to rest. It is my sign saying, hey, dude, this is your drop in dB. You need to feel disconnected, because the connections you're about to make are so incredible. And you need to feel like this is a downtime, because this is the darkest before the dawn moment. And what's happening right around this corner, and the worse you feel is the closer you are to it. And that's when it drops. But you need this dichotomy. You need this deliberate perturbance of your vibe to be able to be deliberately perturbed the other direction in such a way that it makes you want to get out of bed every morning. This is how you allow the universe to surprise you, and you have to be open to it, but it will surprise the hell out of you, based again on your thoughts. And there's a lot of study on this. But if you talk about people in this state, another way to look at it is, it's the darkest before the dawn moment, but it's also this moment for you just to relax, recluse, go in hermit mode, just sit still and sit with it. Don't fight it. Don't wish it was over. Sit with it, talk to it. Hey, I see that you're feeling this way. I see that you're presenting yourself and manifesting in my reality. I want to let you know that you have my attention and you have the floor, please. Most of the time it runs away. It's a form of the resistance that Stephen Pressfield talks about in his book, The War of Art. It's this idea that you need that juxtaposition, because we need it here. If it was daytime all the time, it'd get old, right? If you had porridge all the time, it gets old. You need the variety, you need the hot cold, you need the dichotomy, even in the largest of levels, as above, so below. So if you look at it that way, then everything is necessary. It's all important. Now, another thing to think about on this, and this may give people some hope, if you share the idea of unity consciousness, one of the most refreshing things that's ever been told to me, and so I pass it around any opportunity I get, sometimes like I am now injecting the opportunity, is to say that, let's say that you are part of this unity consciousness model where we're all the same thing, or we're all part of a whole, but we're here as an individualistic expression of that whole to experience itself subjectively. Okay, basically we're all one damn thing. We split up into a bunch of things, and then we're getting information and we're coming back like the Borg, right? But you have autonomy and you have free will and all that good stuff. So if that's the case, then looking at it from that perspective, you can't, like I said, go wrong, and it's all going to work out. Everything's fine. This is the hope, though. But also what's beautiful about this, and my favorite part about it is if that's the case, you have lived, and time isn't the same. You're only, like I said, limited to this experience with it, and so that's why we have it. But really, you've lived all of these lives already. You've lived every life in every time period a bajillion infinite number of times. That's how infinity works. And you've done it through a focused perception. So basically, you've played all the roles in the movie. You've done it all. what comforts me, and especially in those times like this, is number one, to hold on, because that's your EDM drop. It's about, the bass is about to drop and you're about to be dancing. That's what this means. It's darkest before the dawn. Something is right there, dude, right there. And you've got to experience this so that the gift that you get is received in such an exciting way. The universe loves to see you happy. That is something you really need to come to terms with. The universe loves you because it's you. You're all that's here. So you're all that it is. So it wants to see you happy and joyous. And that's what it wants for you. So keep that in mind as well.
Yes, that's beautiful. And you know, that's interesting. You're talking about that, Brandon. I've actually recently acknowledged that when I'm uncreative, or you have your dark days, you can't do anything, you can't write, you can't draw. I've actually, without any contamination, and this is what you're saying about the hive mind, like the ball, we're all connected. I've actually said to myself, do you know, it's okay. Let go, let it be, just accept it. And it works.
Yeah. That's the best thing you can do. And because the more you fight it, that's also the thing. So like attracts like, and it bases its result in your reality based on how you feel, not what's real. But it doesn't know what's real and what's fake, which is what's so cool, is you could train your subconscious to say anything you want. And it's just like absolutely crazy cool. So another thing that I just wanted to wrap up that one thought on was the second part of that. Number one, darkest for the dawn, your time's coming. Number two, that if this is the case, that you've been all of these lifetimes, that you've lived everything in bajillion times, it's interesting, and it's just a cool question to look in the mirror and ask yourself, why are you focused in this consciousness right now? Why, if you could be anything else in any state of being, are you consciously focused in this meat bag on this planet right now? The answer I tend to favor to that question is because it's your favorite one. That to me gives me like the most warmth and joy, and to a point to where it's like, no matter what happens, you know that this is your favorite one. You've lived all of them. You've been King Arthur. You've been Kanye. You've done all that. Like you've been all those expressions, and they were not your favorite one. This is your favorite one. So no matter how dark it gets, just remember that. You can be anything, and you chose as source to be this.
That is beautifully put, and poetry in its finest, Brandon.
And also, this is for our listeners. All this wonderful knowledge and advice, and this wonderful guest can be seen on Expanding Reality.
Oh, yeah,
which we'll give the address to.
We'll do that in a moment. But Brandon, it's been absolutely amazing that you say that you're not someone that experiences, but my goodness me, you come across more as an evolved teacher, and that is, I think that's awesome, because we're all connected. I mean, I can absolutely relate to a lot of what you're saying, and of course we also have found ourselves in those situations where you can't see any way out. But I think we have our own formulas about how we deal with it. Sometimes what I do is I just put my hands up and say, that's it, I'm walking, I'm just leaving it. And then what you find is when you've released that, things tend to kind of they're not as bad as what you thought they would be, and things seem to turn around in alternate ways. It's kind of there to help you. So I totally get what you were saying. It's really beautiful. It's wonderful.
100%. Well, that analogy came from somebody that's a dear friend of mine named Heather Thomas. I've had her on the show. She's just a dear friend. And that's something she enlightened me to that just gave me goosebumps. I mean, it gave me chills. And it's something that I like to think about in my darkest moments, that, all right, no matter how you feel right now, number one, you're right there. You're so close, just hang in there. The only way to lose is not to play. And so when you look at it from that vantage point, it's really interesting. Again, the fruit tree analogy, every branch leads to fruit. There's no wrong way home. There's no bad way to go. There's no one judging you at the end either. You judge you, but you quickly realize that it's silly, is the reports that come back from near-death experiencers. So with all of this cumulative knowledge, you can walk through this with your head tall. You should feel empowered, because the system around you, the same system that, again, I've recognized as something you should probably be a little bit more scrutinous of before you just blindly obey from an opinion standpoint, not telling anyone how to live their lives. But I will say that whenever you achieve that level of scrutiny, you get it within yourself as well. There's an honesty that you reach with yourself that's very important. And this is part of the struggle of 4D. This is where a lot of traumas come out. This is where a lot of experiences happen that will bring up things that are going to challenge you in ways that you've never been challenged before. And it's heavy and it's dark, but to know that it's necessary and that it's beautiful and that you're going to be so much happier on the other side is something I think that everybody should keep in mind.
Well, that is absolutely beautiful. And, we, both Ronald and I, have to thank you so much, Brandon, for coming on our show. And, if there's any advice that you want to give those good souls out there, another bit of tidbit or wonderment, what would that be, Brandon? What would you say to those souls out there?
The main message of anything, and I'm going to start it with this, gentlemen. You boys know that both of you hold an incredibly special place in my heart. I absolutely adore both of you. We are kindred spirits for sure. I know we meet up in every lifetime. It's so cool that we got to do it again in this one. And from the bottom of my heart, you boys are very special to me. And so thank you.
You are also, Brandon. Don't worry about that, sir.
You're also to us.
I know it's all love, and I'm grateful.
But your shows are wonderful. And I'm going to just say this to you. I love the intro as well.
Oh, thank you. I made that.
It really pumps you up. It really gets you really into it. And your guests are so wonderful on this show. And you're not afraid to touch any aspect of the world or any kind of paranormal activity. As you said, you're open to all. You listen, and it's wonderful. And we learn so much from this. So I love your expanding reality for our listeners. You've got to subscribe to this. And so I love it. I think it's fantastic.
I think that we are moving in extraordinary times. I think that those times are showing us that we are more than flesh and blood entities with a sell-by date. I feel myself personally that now more people than ever before are beginning to, link in with other souls like yourself, and realizing that, wow, you learn so much, you evolve, you change, you transform, and that magic, that mystery, that power, that force, that godliness that we all are, trying to reach towards to empower ourselves. And interestingly, very quickly here, Brandon, I have always loved my films. I've loved actors. I wanted to play the parts of actors. I wanted to be those actors. I wanted to be all of it, a superhero, the person that's going through the trauma. Yeah, it's incredible how the multidimensional self yearns for this type of identity.
There again, as Brandon said, you may have experienced that.
Yeah,
all of it.
Absolutely.
It's like an ocean, isn't it? We're droplets of the ocean.
What Brandon said made absolute sense.
When you're a wave in the ocean is a good way to experience it. So you're not, the water, you're an individualistic expression of this massive consciousness. And so you're the wave. Like, you get your chance. You get to ride this wave. You get to form however you want. You get to go as long as you want. You get to smell the air. You get to have somebody surf on you if you want. And it's a fun way to be an expression. And then you collapse back into source with the information and knowledge that you have. And then you recycle again and come back as a different wave is one of the ideas. Now, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think it's a fun one. And as far as advice for people, the way that I end my shows is with that little, little thing that I say, and we can go out on that if you'd like. It's a good little fun thing. It is where it's just, go out into this place, whatever this thing is, and y'all just be nice to each other. Buy somebody around you a coffee or a meal. It doesn't have to be a big thing to you, but it makes a massive ripple effect in the collective. Also, pick up a piece of litter. Be nice to everybody that you come across. Hold open doors. Smile. Animal, lizard people, everybody that you come across. Get out of the left-hand lane if somebody's behind you and wants to pass. And of course, as always, above all and anything else, go out into this beautiful place, whatever the hell it is, and just be good to one another.
Kill them with kindness. It always works. And that's quite right, Brandon. You do feel good when you help someone out, or if someone's a bit down on their chips. It does work, and it's beautiful. I think it's lovely.
And I also have to mention here that Brandon, got together with a lot of people and bought my brother a pair of glasses that he can see colors through, and they were very expensive. And of course, he was so overwhelmed by your gift, Brandon, that he sometimes closes up and doesn't know how to express himself.
That was one example of your kindness. And you're like an angel. And for someone to do that for me, which you yourself did, and the kind souls behind it, I'm so grateful to you. That was like an angel.
Anyway, yeah.
I'll take your kind words on that, and I'm grateful. But I will say this, that it actually did way more for me than it did for you. And the reason is because we're always presented with opportunities. Again, back to that, if you're standing in line and someone in front of you orders a coffee and you don't immediately say, I've got that, then that's what I'm talking about. Some people may have the impulse to do it and feel awkward, but just, hey, can I get that for you? It actually helps me way more than you. It's a pay it forward thing. So actually, what you gifted me in that moment, and you didn't do it intentionally, you didn't ask for them. It was an intuitive thing that I picked up from our conversation, that you're an artist that's never seen color. And in my mind, I thought, well, there's a thing on this planet that exists where this guy can see color. So I'm just going to send him a pair. And that's as much as it was for me, honestly. But what I'm grateful for you for is the opportunity for me to be a greater, grander version of who I really am. And so you gifted me the opportunity to practice what I preach, to walk the walk, to be able to take myself up on being a greater, grander version of myself. So it's actually me who's in gratitude to you for that experience. But I'm grateful that you're getting something out of it too.
Bless you. It's like giving Beethoven a hearing aid.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
there you
right.
go.
Well, anyway, we are coming to the end of the show, and Brendan, it's been absolutely awesome to have you on board, and we're so honored because you are on our list of guests to come on, esteemed guests. So tell the listeners out there, Brendan, how they can get hold of you.
Yes, sir. Thank you again. Always grateful, boys. Yes, y'all can find me. The best way is just expandingrealitypodcast.com. That's going to be kind of a central hub. It's got, Rockfin, which I'm starting to do these really interesting live shows, and I'm going to actually call you boys to hop in on a couple of them with me. And so Rockfin is a really cool place, as well as that's where like merchandise, if you want to have some t-shirts, I've had some really cool artists do some really cool stuff. And so those are all up there and linked at the website. And then all the socials. So TikTok, I do some really cool stuff over there for the show. And then Instagram and Facebook and all that kind of stuff is linked over there. So that's kind of a hub. And then that's also where like premium content is. I have some extra stuff up there, the stuff that you can't put on YouTube because it'll get banned. And so we have it over there. And then also all the episodes are up. So you boys, y'all's episodes are up over there. So all of it's there, just expandingrealitypodcast.com. And thank you guys so much again.
Thank you so much, Brendan. We will have to have you back on our show, as you do with all our guests. We normally catch up with them a little way down the road, but thank you so much for your words of wisdom and your knowledge, and for, giving a little bit of your love and your consciousness to others out there. And thank you so much.
Well, I'm grateful to be of service. Thank you.
Thank you. And you've been listening to Twin Souls, your hosts, Philip and Ronald Kinsella. Stay safe and keep your eyes peeled to the sky.